Long before anyone in Manila would ever hear his voice, before any judge ever stood for him or any spotlight ever touched his face, Rafa Santos was simply the boy who sang to the sea. Every morning, just before sunrise, the same sound filled their tiny bamboo hut, a crackle, a hiss, a burst of static, and then, Elvis. Not the polished studio Elvis, but an old, warbling version that came from his grandfather's battered radio, an ancient thing with chipped wood, rusty knobs, and a broken antenna held together with fishing wire. "Good morning, Lolo," Rafa used to whisper as a child, climbing onto his grandfather's lap, listening to Can't Help Falling in Love drift through the humid air. Lolo Tomas would smile and tap gently on Rafa's chest. "Listen to that, Apo. That voice has soul. Never lose your soul." When Lolo's voice disappeared from their home years later, the radio stayed still, crackling, still singing, still carrying pieces of him. Rafa kept it close like a beating heart, even when everything else in life felt uncertain. Now 17, Rafa had the same routine. Before the village roosters crowed, before the fishermen pushed their boats into the tide, before his widowed mother woke from exhaustion, Rafa slipped outside with the radio in hand. He sat on the same damp rock facing Manila Bay, letting the morning light wash over him. He pressed the radio to life. Static. Buzz. Then that deep, unmistakable voice. "Wise men say." Rafa closed his eyes. It didn't matter that the radio was old or that his neighbors joked he lived in the wrong decade. When Elvis sang, the world softened. The waves seemed to sway with the melody. And somewhere deep inside, Rafa's fears loosened, like knots gently unraveling. He sang with him, not imitating, not pretending, just letting the music slide into his lungs, letting emotion carve its place in his voice. His voice wasn't polished. It wasn't trained. It wasn't perfect. But it was sincere. Villagers passing by often paused, caught between surprise and confusion. "That boy. Why does he sound like that? Like an American singer? No, like Elvis Presley himself." Some laughed affectionately and called him LBSNG Barangay. Elvis of the village. They said it playfully, not cruelly, but the nickname always made him shrink. He was just Rafa. A boy who worked at the pier to help his mother. A boy whose dreams felt too heavy for his small frame. Every day after singing to the waves, he headed toward the Bayside market. The air smelled of saltfish, diesel fuel, and freshly cut coconuts. His job was simple: carry crates, help unload boats, sweep the pier, and earn whatever money he could. The other boys his age teased him. "Rafa, why don't you cut your hair? You look like an old rock star. Sing something, Elvis, come on." He forced a smile, pretending he didn't mind. What they didn't know was that every coin he earned went straight into a jar hidden under his bed. A jar meant for a dream he barely said out loud. A real home. One where his mother didn't have to sleep on a floor mat, or patch holes in the roof whenever storms rolled through. At night, after work, Rafa sang again, this time for the sea. The moonlight shimmered across the water like silver paint strokes, and Rafa sang out his worries, his hopes, his grief. Locals often stopped to listen from afar. They didn't say anything, maybe too shy, maybe too moved, but they stayed until he finished. Sometimes his mother stood at the doorway, listening with her hand pressed to her chest. She never interrupted. She simply let him sing, as if she knew that was the only thing holding him together. One evening, as Rafa sang, "Love Me Tender," a stranger approached quietly. He wasn't from their village, his clothes were too clean, his shoes too polished, his accent too Manila. Rafa stopped singing immediately, startled. The man smiled. "Don't stop. Your voice, it's special." Rafa blushed. I'm just practicing, sir." "No," the man said gently. "You're performing. And you do it with heart." Rafa shifted awkwardly. Compliments weren't familiar territory. "What's your name, son?" "Rafael Santos." "But everyone calls me Rafa." "Well, Rafa," the man said, pulling a flyer from his bag, "have you heard about AGT Manila?" Rafa's breath hitched. Of course he had. The show had been the talk of the Philippines, America's Got Talent, bringing a special edition to Manila for 2025. Thousands were planning to audition. But people like him didn't belong on stages. The man handed him the flyer. Auditions are this weekend. You should go. Rafa laughed nervously. Sir. I work at the pier. We don't have money for travel, or clothes, or... The man cut him off. Talent doesn't care where you come from. Rafa stared at the paper, the bold letters glowing under the streetlight. AGT Manila 2025, bring your talent to the world. He felt a tremor inside his chest. But... Why me? Rafa whispered. The man stepped closer, lowering his voice. Because when I heard you sing just now, I felt something I haven't felt in years. Your voice, it brings people home. Then he smiled, placed a small amount of money in Rafa's hand, and said. I want you to audition. No payment needed. No expectations. Just sing. Before Rafa could respond, the man had already walked away, disappearing into the night like a messenger from another world. Rafa stood there trembling not from fear, but from the possibility he didn't dare touch. When he returned home, his mother sensed something different in his eyes. What happened? She asked softly. Rafa hesitated, then handed her the flyer. She held it carefully, like it might crumble. Her voice shook. Anik. Do you want this? He looked down at his grandfather's old radio still glowing dimly on the table and thought of that voice that had raised him, comforted him, carried him. Yes, Rafa whispered. For the first time in my life. I think I do. He didn't know it yet, but that single decision, the courage to try, was the spark that would ignite a story that traveled far beyond Manila, all the way to the hearts of people around the world. The morning of the AGT Manila audition felt unreal from the moment Rafa opened his eyes. Manila's air was thicker than the air back home, denser, louder, buzzing with traffic and people and possibilities Rafa had never imagined he'd stand among. Hundreds, maybe thousands, lined up outside the arena, each holding guitars, costumes, props, even animals. Rafa clutched only two things. His grandfather's old denim jacket. And the vintage radio wrapped in cloth. He didn't bring it to perform with, he brought it for courage. His mother squeezed his arm. Breathe, Anak. You can do this. He nodded, but his hands wouldn't stop trembling. He felt small, out of place, like a fisherman's son pretending to belong in a world built for stars. Inside the waiting area, contestants buzzed with nervous chatter. A hip-hop group practiced flips. A magician rehearsed card tricks. A 9-year-old girl hummed operatic warm-ups. Meanwhile, Rafa sat quietly in a corner, clutching the radio. People glanced at him. Some whispered. Is he auditioning alone? Does he even have an instrument? He looks like he walked here from the province. Their murmurs tightened the knot in his stomach. Then, a soft voice spoke beside him. Hi. I'm Chloe. Rafa looked up. A girl around his age, wearing bright sneakers and an even brighter smile, held out her hand. She wasn't judging him. She wasn't curious. She was just kind. You look nervous, she said. Rafa chuckled nervously. Am I that obvious? A little, she laughed. But it's okay. Everyone is. I'm shaking too, you know. She lifted her hand trembling like a leaf. Rafa felt a small smile form on his lips. What will you sing? She asked. Elvis, Rafa whispered. It's what I grew up with. Her eyes widened. No way, that's awesome. No one sings Elvis anymore. Maybe for a reason, he muttered. Maybe it's old. She shook her head firmly. Great voices never get old. Before he could respond, a crew member shouted. Contestant 1930, Rafael Santos. Please proceed backstage. Rafa froze. His heart pounded like a drum. His legs felt heavy. He turned to Chloe, wide-eyed. Go, she whispered, placing a hand on his arm. Show them why you're here. Those simple words held him up as he walked through the maze of curtains and cables. Backstage was chaotic, lights flashing, crew members rushing, producers adjusting headsets. But Rafa barely saw any of it. His mind was running loops of fear. What if his accent was too strong? What if they laughed? What if he froze? What if Elvis wasn't enough? A stage manager handed him a mic. You'll walk out when the lights shift to blue. Judges will ask a few questions. Speak clearly, don't rush. Good luck. Good luck. Two small words that suddenly felt enormous. And then, the lights turned blue. Contestant 1930, you're on. Rafa stepped into the blinding brightness. The auditorium felt endless rows and rows of people, their silhouettes stretching into darkness. Above them, cameras from every angle. And in front, the judges' table, 3 judges stared at him. A famous Philippine pop star, smiling politely. A beloved comedian, eyes curious. And the American judge Blake Turner, the man known globally for his brutal honesty. He was the one Rafa feared the most. What's your name? Blake asked, leaning forward. Rafael Santos, he replied, voice trembling. But everyone calls me Rafa. Where are you from? A small fishing village in Cavite, sir. And what will you be doing for us today? Blake asked. Rafa took a breath. I will sing Elvis Presley. The audience murmured. The comedian smirked. Blake raised an eyebrow. Elvis? That's a big voice to imitate. I'm not here to imitate, sir, Rafa said quietly. I'm here to honor what he meant to me. The pop star's expression softened. Blake still looked unconvinced. All right then, Blake said. The first chords began simple, soft, acoustic. Rafa gripped the mic with both hands. His stomach churned. His knees wobbled. But then, he imagined his grandfather's hand tapping gently on his chest. Never lose your soul. Rafa opened his mouth. Wise men say, only fools rush in. The note floated out, not shaky, not small but warm, full, rich. A voice shaped not by training, but by devotion. A voice that carried the humility of village nights and the tenderness of memory. The audience stirred. But I can't help falling in love with you. Gasps spread through the crowd. The pop star leaned back, stunned. The comedian's smile faded into awe. And Blake's eyebrows slowly rose. Rafa wasn't just singing. He was pouring. Every emotion he buried, every dream he hid, every night he spent whispering to the ocean, all of it came out in that soulful, timeless sound. He slid into the second verse, eyes closed, heart open. Like a river flows surely to the sea. A mother in the audience wiped her eyes. A father hugged his son. A fisherman from the back row stood frozen, jaw dropped. By the final line, Rafa felt like the entire universe had gone silent, listening to him breathe. Take my hand. Take my whole life, too. For I can't help falling in love with you. The last note faded like a prayer. For a full second, no one moved. Then, the room exploded. The audience rose to their feet, roaring, clapping, whistling, shouting his name. Rafa. 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 But Rafa didn't hear the cheers. He heard his heartbeat pounding against his ribs, felt tears building behind his eyes. The judges stood too. The pop star placed a hand over her chest. Raphael. That was pure soul. The comedian shook his head. You sing like you've lived 3 lifetimes. Blake waited. The crowd hushed. He leaned forward, voice steady, unusually gentle. Raphael, there are people who sing. And there are people who feel. You feel every single note. That wasn't Elvis. That was you. Rafa's breath hitched. Blake continued. And I'll tell you something else. That was the best audition today. The audience roared again. Rafa blinked rapidly as tears blurred his vision. He had done it. He had truly done it. And somewhere deep inside, he felt his grandfather smiling. A deep hush settled over the arena, so sudden and absolute it felt almost unreal. Even the cameras paused their mechanical swiveling, as if they too sensed something extraordinary was about to unfold. The lights dimmed just a little, leaving Miguel standing in a quiet golden glow, like a lone star on a vast horizon. His fingers shook slightly as they gripped the microphone. Not from fear, he had been afraid when he was younger, when life's demands overshadowed his dreams. Tonight, it was something else. Something bigger. A kind of destiny humming in his veins. He opened his mouth, and in that instant, the world changed. The first note, low, rich, unmistakably resonant, rolled across the arena like distant thunder. Deep, smooth, magnetic. It didn't just sound similar to Elvis, it carried the same warmth, the same nostalgia, the same soul that once powered the voice of a legend. It was as if Miguel had reached into history and pulled forth an echo that had been waiting for someone worthy enough to carry it again. A ripple of shock washed through the room. Gasps burst from the audience like fireworks. Several people stood up instinctively, not out of courtesy but because their bodies demanded it. Some sounds simply refused to be listened to sitting down. Miguel didn't see any of it. He had slipped into a space known only to true artists, a space where music wasn't just sung, but lived. He tilted the mic slightly, closed his eyes, and took the second note even higher. The smaller imperfections of life, hunger, exhaustion, years of carrying burdens too heavy for a young man, melted away under the spotlight. All that remained was pure sound. He swayed gently, almost unconsciously, falling into the signature rhythm Elvis was known for, but not copying. Not mimicking. He wasn't pretending to be the king. He was sharing something personal, a childhood memory of sitting outside an old Sorry Sorry store with his father, listening to a crackling radio station that played Elvis every Sunday afternoon. He remembered how his father would hum softly, tapping Miguel's shoulder with a smile that said, "One day, Anak, your voice will bring people hope." That memory wrapped itself around him now like a warm blanket. It softened his features. It put a gentle ache in his voice. And when he finally hit the chorus, powerful, soaring, unbelievably controlled, the entire arena froze. Simon Cowell's expression changed first. His usual judging mask cracked, revealing something rare, something almost vulnerable. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes narrowing not in skepticism, but in disbelief. It wasn't often he felt this way. It wasn't often anyone surprised him. But Miguel was different. In the third row, an elderly American tourist wiped away a tear she hadn't expected. She had grown up listening to Elvis with her mother, dancing barefoot in their living room. Miguel's voice reopened that memory so vividly it felt like stepping back in time. A young Filipino girl near the stage clutched her chest, whispering, "Mama. He sounds like him. Like the real Elvis." The mother beside her nodded, speechless. Miguel opened his eyes for a moment, just a brief second, and that was when he saw it. The ocean of faces, glowing with awe. Stranger after stranger looking at him not like a contestant, but like someone who had just awakened something precious in them. The reaction nearly overwhelmed him. His throat tightened for an instant, and the note faltered just slightly. Not enough for anyone else to notice, but enough for him to feel it. Years of singing on street corners, in cramped jeepneys, at noisy local bars had taught him one thing: when emotions threatened to break the voice, transform that emotion into power. So he did. He leaned into the final verse, pouring everything, every hardship, every sacrifice, every dream he had tucked away into dark corners of his heart into that last stretch of melody. His voice cracked, not from weakness, but from truth. And that truth filled the air like sunlight breaking through thick storm clouds. Somewhere backstage, a production assistant whispered, "This is it. This is the moment we'll replay for years." The audience didn't clap, yet they couldn't. They were held in place, caught between breath and heartbeat. Miguel drew the final note out long and smooth, letting it travel to the farthest corners of the arena until it faded like the last light of dusk. Silence followed. A long, deep, reverent silence. And then, the crowd exploded. The roar was so loud it vibrated through the floor. People rose to their feet, cheering, shouting, crying, clapping with the full force of their hearts. Dozens of people pressed their hands to their mouths, speechless. Security guards looked stunned. Even the camera operators forgot to hide their reactions. Miguel stood perfectly still, breathing hard, unsure whether to smile or cry. The applause washed over him like a wave, warm and overwhelming. The judges rose in unison, something that never happened unless a performance was truly unforgettable. But it was Simon's face that Miguel saw first. For a moment, the two simply held eye contact, one man who had spent decades shaping the music industry, and one young Filipino singer who had just done something no one expected. Simon didn't look impressed. I looked moved. Deeply moved. Miguel swallowed hard, his chest rising and falling. He clutched the microphone closer, whispering a quiet, trembling, "Salamat po." "Thank you." But the cheers swallowed his words. In that moment, under the blinding lights and the thunder of thousands of hands clapping for him, Miguel realized something profound. He had not simply sung like Elvis. He had awakened the spirit of a legend. By finally believing in the legend inside himself. The cheers finally softened, though only slightly, like waves still crashing on the shore long after the storm had passed. Miguel stood beneath the glowing lights, his chest still rising from the intensity of the performance. His palms were sweaty, but his grip remained firm around the microphone. He wasn't shaking anymore. The boy who once sang on sidewalks to buy rice had grown into a man standing on one of the biggest stages in the world. The energy, the electricity of the moment buzzed through him. But nothing could have prepared him for what came next. A soft ding barely audible under the noise signaled that the judges' microphones had turned on. The crowd instinctively quieted, but the excitement still pulsed in the air like a heartbeat. Simon Cowell leaned forward, fingers steepled beneath his chin, his expression unreadable. That alone was enough to make the entire audience hold their breath. "Miguel," Simon finally said, slowly, as though carefully selecting each word. "There are performers who impress me. Singers who surprise me, and then, very rarely," he paused, letting the silence thicken, "someone like you appears." Miguel's breath hitched. The crowd murmured, then stilled again. "You didn't just sing," Simon continued, his voice low. "You reminded me of what music is supposed to do. Move people. You brought back a feeling I haven't experienced in years." Miguel lowered his gaze for a moment, overwhelmed. Pride? Fear? Gratitude? He wasn't sure. He felt everything at once, like a tide rushing through his chest. Then Simon's expression softened just barely, but genuinely. "And I need to tell you something. You deserve to know." "Ah." Miguel lifted his head, confusion flickering in his eyes. "In the early stages of this competition," Simon said, "one of our casting producers showed me a clip of a Filipino singer performing in a small street market only a minute long. He tapped the judge's desk lightly. I was told the singer didn't apply, didn't audition, didn't even consider the possibility. But the voice." He shook his head, almost laughing. "I couldn't forget it." The audience leaned in. Miguel's heart thudded painfully. He had no idea where this was going. "That clip," Simon said slowly, "was you." A collective gasp shot through the arena. Miguel staggered back half a step. His lips parted, but no sound came out. Simon continued, "One of our talent scouts was visiting Manila last year. They heard you singing at a food stall near Ermita. You didn't see them. You were just performing naturally, beautifully. You probably thought no one important was listening." He gave a small smile. "But when I saw the footage, I knew we had to find you." Miguel stared at him, stunned. Was this real? Was this how he ended up here? He had been chosen. Discovered. Not by chance, but because his voice, his everyday singing had reached someone who believed in him before he even knew it. We were struggling that day." Miguel whispered without intending to speak aloud. "I was just singing to earn." "Ah. To help your family," Simon finished softly. "Yes. We learned that." Miguel froze. How much did they know? "And when we reached out to invite you," Simon said, "your first response wasn't about fame. It wasn't even about yourself." He looked directly into Miguel's eyes. "Do you remember what you told our producer?" He looked divided the stenden, with nada viosing, in mormal stunt, and data vials. Miguel nodded slowly. His voice cracked. "I said, if I win anything, it's for my mother's medicines. Not for me." The arena fell into a hush, so deep it felt sacred. Miguel clenched the microphone tighter. He hadn't intended to reveal that, not to millions of viewers, not even to the judges. But he had said it instinctively then because it was true. His mother had been bedridden for months, her medicines costing more than they earned in weeks. His father worked 2 jobs and still came home exhausted. His siblings often skipped meals so she could eat. Miguel's dream wasn't stardom. His dream was saving his family. Simon nodded, his jaw tightening in a rare moment of visible emotion. And that, he said firmly, is why what I'm about to say matters. He sat back. Then looked to his left. Howie Mandel leaned forward. His usual comedic spark had vanished, replaced by sincerity. Miguel, he said, when an artist has a voice like yours and a heart like yours, that's when we see something truly special. Alesha Dixon wiped a tear discreetly. You sang with such soul. Such truth. It wasn't Elvis, we felt it was you. Your story, your pain, your love. Then Heidi Klum placed a hand over her heart. You reminded us how powerful humanity can be when someone gives their whole heart in just one song. Miguel swallowed hard, overwhelmed. Simon lifted his hand slightly, signaling that he had one final thing to say. The arena fell so silent that even Miguel's heartbeat felt loud. Miguel, Simon said gently, I think your father was right. Your voice does bring hope. Miguel blinked rapidly, suddenly fighting back tears. And because of that, Simon reached toward a familiar button. That large, glowing, iconic button. The golden buzzer. A tidal wave of screams erupted even before he pressed it. Miguel gasped, shaking his head, tears streaming freely now. No, sir. But the crowd drowned him out. Simon stood, his hand hovering over the button. You're not just a contestant, he said firmly. You're a reminder of why this show exists. This is for your mother. For your family. For the world to hear your courage. And with a single, powerful press. Boom. A burst of shimmering gold exploded from above. Confetti rained down like a storm of stars. The arena shook with cheers so loud they felt like thunder. Miguel dropped to his knees, his hands covering his face as golden flakes coated his hair, his clothes, his shaking shoulders. Crew members rushed forward. Judges stood cheering. The audience cried, clapped, shouted his name. He sobbed openly, freely, with a lifetime of weight pouring out in that moment. Simon walked toward him, placing a reassuring hand on his back. Well done, Miguel, he said quietly. You've earned this. Miguel looked up through the falling gold, his vision blurred by tears, and whispered the words that came straight from his soul. For my family. For everyone who believed in me. Thank you. And in that moment, bathed in golden light, Miguel felt something he had never felt before, not even once in his hardest years. He felt seen. He felt worthy. He felt like the world was finally hearing the voice he had carried since the beginning. The gold confetti had long since settled onto the stage, but Miguel still felt it resting not on his shoulders, but somewhere deep inside his chest, glowing like a second heartbeat. Even backstage, far from the roar of the audience, he could still hear echoes of the moment that changed everything. Producers hurried around him, crew members congratulated him, and fellow contestants hugged him tightly. Yet Miguel barely heard any of it. His ears were still ringing with a kind of white noise, like the sea breeze that used to whistle through the wooden cracks of their tiny home in Manila. He felt weightless, as though he had left part of himself out there on that stage with the judges, with the audience, with the millions who were surely watching. Then someone tapped his shoulder. Not a crew member. Not another contestant. A presence that felt strangely familiar now. Simon Cowell. Miguel, he said softly. The boy straightened instinctively. His hands trembled around the golden envelope he had been given. He bowed his head in respect, an instinct born from Filipino manners he had carried since childhood. Sir Simon. His voice cracked slightly. Thank you. I don't even know what to say. You don't need to say anything, Simon replied. His tone was different, warmer, almost fatherly. You earned every second of what happened out there. Miguel lowered his eyes. His throat tightened. I just hope my family was able to watch it. My mother. He swallowed, emotion rising. She hasn't been able to leave her bed in weeks. Simon nodded slowly. I know. The producers briefed me. Then, gently, he added, that's why I wanted to give you something. He reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out a small, worn, black velvet pouch. Miguel blinked. Sir, what is that? Simon glanced around, guiding him to a quieter corner backstage, away from cameras, away from noise. He placed the pouch carefully into Miguel's hand. Open it, he said. Miguel loosened the string with trembling fingers. Inside, cushioned in soft velvet, was an old, silver microphone, its metal aged, its surface slightly worn, yet polished with care. It looked nothing like the modern studio mics Miguel had seen on TV. This one carried history. I restored it, Simon said quietly. It belonged to my father. Miguel's breath caught. No one, not even fans who studied the judge's life, knew much about Simon's relationship with his father. Some said it was distant. Others said it was complicated. But everyone knew one thing: Simon's father had been the first to believe in him before the world ever did. Miguel lifted the microphone carefully, almost reverently. The weight of it felt symbolic, like he was holding not just metal, but memories. Why? Why give this to me? He whispered. Simon paused. His expression softened. Because my father loved Elvis, he said. And when he played Elvis records around the house, it was the one time everything felt peaceful. Connected. Music did that for us. He exhaled slowly. When I heard you sing tonight, Miguel, I felt something I haven't felt in years. I felt my father again. Miguel stared at him, stunned. You don't just sound like Elvis, Simon continued. You carry the same humility. The same vulnerability. The same ability to touch a listener's soul. His voice grew quiet. You remind people of home. Miguel pressed the microphone to his chest, overwhelmed. Sir. I don't deserve something this important. You do, Simon said firmly. Because I know you'll use it to bring hope to people just like Elvis did. And just like my father believed music could. Miguel's eyes filled. He wiped them quickly with the sleeve of his shirt, embarrassed. I promise, he whispered. I'll use it well. Simon nodded once. That's all I ask. A soft chime sounded overhead the backstage speaker, announcing that the next performer needed to prepare. The world continued moving, even in moments that felt frozen in time. Simon gave Miguel's shoulder a gentle squeeze and then walked away, leaving the boy standing there with the treasured microphone in his hands. Miguel stepped outside the building minutes later, escaping the fluorescent lights for the cool Manila night. The air was thick with ocean breeze and the distant sounds of jeepneys and street vendors. Life was busy, messy, beautiful, just as it always had been. He walked toward the edge of the pier behind the venue, where the city lights shimmered brightly across the water. The smell of salt and the sound of the waves were comforting, reminding him of home. He held the silver microphone with both hands, staring down at it under the moonlight. Each small reflection seemed to tell a story: his childhood days singing at the Sari Sari store, the nights when hunger hid beneath laughter, the mornings when he wondered if dreams only belonged to other people. He closed his eyes and whispered, Ma. Papa. At. Kuya. We're going to be okay. He imagined his mother watching from bed, tears rolling down her cheeks. His father, trying to hide his pride but failing miserably. His siblings jumping and screaming in their living room, neighbors crowding around their small window to watch the replay. He took a deep breath and lifted the microphone to his lips, not to sing, but to speak to the universe. For everyone who ever felt invisible, he whispered, this is for you. A breeze swept across his face. It felt like a blessing. Suddenly, behind him, footsteps approached. He turned to see the fishermen who had traveled from his province, the same men who had surprised him in the audience. Miguel. Tito Rodel, the eldest among them, called out. Your mother watched everything. We called her. She's crying from happiness right now. Miguel's heart swelled. The fishermen circled him, placing an arm around him, clapping his shoulders, laughing, crying, celebrating, not as fans, but as family. You carried all of us on that stage, one of them said. You made our whole province proud, another added. Miguel shook his head, voice soft, no, Po, you carried me. They walked together along the pier, their silhouettes glowing under the moonlight, a small circle of love around a boy who had just changed his entire world through the power of music. And in that moment, Miguel realized something he had never understood before. His dream wasn't just his. It belonged to everyone who believed in him. Everyone who needed hope. Everyone who needed a reminder that the world could still be kind. As the night deepened and the city lights shimmered across the bay, Miguel lifted the vintage microphone again and whispered with a smile, "This is only the beginning." And somewhere, carried by the wind, the world seemed to whisper back, "We're listening."